Hello there, class, grade 12 college. Let's get right down to business today, talking about Sherlock Holmes and the end of the Hound of the Baskervilles. Well, not quite the end, but we're getting there at this point, right? Because we're zeroing in, or Sherlock is zeroing in, rather, on this gentleman Stapleton. Right? So, as we talked about last time, Sherlock is quite convinced that Stapleton is what is at the heart of the mystery here, but he lacks the proof, right? He doesn't have the evidence that he needs in order to convict him, right? Right? There's one thing to arrest him, right? But it's another thing to get him found guilty in a court of law, right? Let me call your attention to one. So, we see at the end of chapter 12, right, Watson suggests, why should we not arrest him at once, right? And Sherlock responds, my dear Watson, you were born a man of action, your instinct is always to do something energetic. But supposing, for argument's sake, that we had him arrested tonight, what on earth the better off should we be for that? We could prove nothing against him. There's the devilish cunning of it. If he were acting through a human agent, we could get some evidence, but if we were to drag this great dog to the light of day, it would not help us in putting rope round the neck of its master, right? So, in other words, you can't really prove this whole dog scheme yet, and get him sent to jail for the murder of Sir Charles, right? Because, as it says here, right, Watson says there is Sir Charles's death. Found dead without a mark upon him. You and I know he died of sheer fright, and we also know what frightened him. But how are we to get 12 stolid jurymen to know it? What signs are there of a hound? Where are the marks of its fangs? Of course, we know that a hound does not bite a dead body, and that Sir Charles was dead before ever the brute overtook him. But we have to prove all this, and we are not in position to do it. So, they have no evidence of the murder, right? You know, you can't go to a jury and say, look, it was the dog, right? Unless you have a bunch of cats as your jurymen, you're not going to be able to convict this person. So they need proof. So the rest of the novel isn't so much about who did this crime, right? Because the focus is going to be on Stapleton now. Sherlock isn't wrong. But rather, how can we prove it, right? So that's now the focus here, right? And, you know, fixing the nets is a good title for the next chapter because it is all about, well, you got to get a net to catch this guy. So, the first thing we need is a motivation, right? Why is this Stapleton fellow going after the guy here, right? What is the point of killing Sir Charles, and what's the point of going after Henry, right? So that's the first thing we get here, right? Because there are a bunch of family portraits in the wall, on the walls of the house here in the Baskerville Hall, right, of all their ancestors. And Sherlock takes a look at him, and uh, he looks at Hugo, who we'll remember is the cause of the curse, right? The one who was in the story, right? Let's take a look here. This is in chapter 13. That is the cause of all the mischief. The wicked Hugo who started the Hound of the Baskervilles. We're not likely to forget him. I gazed with some interest and some surprise upon the portrait. Dear me, said Holmes, he seems a quiet, meek-mannered man enough, but I dare say there was a lurking devil in his eyes. I had pictured him as a more robust and ruffianly person. There is no doubt about the authenticity, for the name and the date 1647 are on the back of the canvas. Holmes said little more, but the picture of the old roisterer seemed a little to have a fascination for him, and his eyes were continually fixed upon it during supper. It was not until later, when Sir Henry had gone to his room, that I was able to follow the trend of his thoughts. He led me back into the banqueting hall, his bedroom candle in his hand, and he held it against the time-stained portrait on the wall. Do you see anything there? I looked at the broad plumed hat, the curling love-locks, the white lace collar, the straight, severe face which had framed between them. It was not a brutal countenance, but it was prim, hard, and stern, with a firm-set, thin-lipped mouth and a coldly intolerant eye. Is it like anyone you know? There was something of Sir Henry about the jaw. Just a suggestion, perhaps, but wait an instant. He curved his right arm over the broad hat and round the ringlets. Good heavens! I cried in amazement. The face of Stapleton had sprung out of the canvas. So, here we find our motivation, right? Because the reason this guy looks like Hugo Baskerville is because this guy is secretly a member of the Baskerville family. The name Stapleton is a disguise. So, the way it works is if he kills Henry, right, he is in line to get his piece of the fortune. So, there's also Laura Lyons, right, who I haven't talked very much about, but she's been mentioned here and there as someone. She's the one who sent Sir Charles the letter, but, well, things start to slowly fall into place here because we find out that Miss Lyons was uh, well, Stapleton was essentially seducing her, right? He was promising to marry her, right? And she was on Stapleton's side as a result. But of course, Stapleton's actually married to the woman who he's pretending is his sister, right? And Holmes tells her that, right? The lady sprang from her chair. This is in chapter 13 still. His wife, she cried. The fact is no longer a secret. The person who has passed for his sister is really his wife. Miss Lyons had resumed her seat. Her hands were grasping the arms of her chair. I saw that pink nails had turned white with the pressure of her grip. His wife, she said again. His wife. He's not a married man. Sherlock Holmes shrugged his shoulders. Prove it to me, and if you can do so. The fierce flash of her eyes said more than any words. I have come prepared to do so, said Holmes, drawing several pages from his pockets. Here is a photograph of the couple taken in York 4 years ago. It is endorsed Mr. and Mrs. Vandeleur, but you will have no difficulty in recognizing him, and also her, if you know her by sight. Here are 3 written descriptions by trustworthy witnesses of Mr. and Mrs. Vandeleur, who at that time kept St. Oliver's private school. Read them and see if you can doubt the identity of these people. She glanced at them and then looked at us with the set, rigid face of a desperate woman. Mr. Holmes, she said, that man had offered me marriage on condition that I could get divorce from my husband. He has lied to me, the villain, in every conceivable way. So, the whole scheme that he had, right, with pretending that his wife is actually his sister, right? That is now perhaps making a little bit more sense, right? Because now we can see that, well, the motivation behind doing that was that he needed to be able to do things like this, manipulate Laura Lyons into sending that letter to Sir Charles, right, to get him out on the moor so that he could set the dog on him, right? So that is the reason that he was doing that, so that he could essentially lure Sir Charles out into the moor and put that dog into action, right? So that is what part of Stapleton's idea is here. So it's time for Holmes to set his net, right? And he's going to use Sir Henry as the bait, right? So as he says over here, just in the middle of chapter 13, he has a simple plan. He says to Henry, first he tells him that they're going to leave. He says, I wish you to drive to Merripit House. Send your trap, however, and let them know you intend to walk home. To walk across the moor? Yes. But that is the very thing you have cautioned me not to do. This time you may do it with safety. If I had not every confidence in your nerve and courage, I would not suggest it, but it is essential that you should do it. Then I will do it. And as you value your life, do not go across the moor in any direction save along the straight path which leads from Merripit House to the Grimpen Road and is your natural way home. I will do just what you say. So they're going to send Sir Henry to have dinner with the Stapletons, right? Go straight into the heart of the beast there, and then after that, he's gonna walk home, right? So walk straight through the moor, right where the dog could potentially catch him, right? So that's the trap that has been set out, and as you can guess, right, they are looking to spring the trap and make sure to end all of these killings and end what Stapleton is doing. So we're almost finished this thing, right? We're really close, actually, right? We're up to chapter 14, and it's just chapter 15 after that, and then we're done, right? Like I said, this isn't a terribly long story. But we're almost done, so I'm going to stop right here, and I'm going to just tell you guys, finish the book, right? We're going to talk about the ending tomorrow, right? And then Thursday, as usual, there's going to be a Google meeting, right? Which will be about the book and everything like that. So let me turn back again to your essays for the rest of this particular video. So let me make something very clear about the questions here. In fact, let me pull them up. So first of all, when it comes to questions like the role of Watson or what makes the novel a page turner or anything like that, you want to make sure you're not just retelling the story, right? So don't retell the story. Don't just say, "Oh, Sherlock Holmes did this, and then Sherlock Holmes did that. Sherlock Holmes did that." Right? If you're talking about, like, say, for instance, the page turner question, um, then you want to make sure that you're focusing on the actual point, right? So you don't want to just say, "Oh, well, Sherlock Holmes figured out that Stapleton is actually descended from Hugo Baskerville," right? And then Watson says this, and then Watson says that. You want to say, "Sherlock Holmes discovered that Hugo Baskerville is his descendant, is Stapleton's descendant, and this makes the reader feel like that, or this makes the reader feel like this," right? So for those kinds of questions, you don't want to just talk about what happened, right? You want to talk about how the reader is made more interested. By the way, I was thinking the other day, I checked before that, I did do an example question back when I was talking about essays about the role of Watson, right? I sort of forgot about that. But just know that when I give you guys examples, don't copy them. And in fact, on the subject of copying. So, guys, this is due on the 23rd, which is next week, right? A week from today, Tuesday, right? So you want to get these things done. And again, I would appreciate it if you could hand it in early so that I could mark them fast because, if everyone hands them in on Tuesday night and the marks are due Wednesday, I'm sort of in trouble, aren't I? I'll have to stay up all night. Oh boy. So please hand it in early, right? Just to make me happy, right? You want a happy teacher to mark your work. Let me just tell you that. But nevertheless, when you write these things, please, 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 as much as you can, not just as much as you can, absolutely, don't copy anything. And this didn't happen too much last essay go, right? I didn't have too many problems. But if you get dinged for plagiarism on this, right? And remember, my Google stuff auto scans your things, right? So if if you copy from something, Google just tells me, right? And if you plagiarize your CPT, you're going to get a 0, and there will not be any time for you to redo anything. So don't you dare copy anything from anywhere, including from my examples. I mean, my example was completely incomplete, but if I see my own writing handed back to me, right, I will be I'm not happy. Now, while you guys are wrapping this up, let me say essay outlines are very good to make, right? Just like last time, if you can show me an essay outline, that would be very good. And you'll submit these things via Google Classroom, and please do it with Google Documents, right? Don't use Microsoft Word and give me an attachment because those are weird for me to edit. It is much easier for me. And remember, you want a happy teacher, right? You want to make me happy. I'm the person who is marking your things. You don't want an annoyed person marking your things, please. So submit it through Google Documents, right, so that I can type corrections right into it rather than making comments. All right, so that is what I will say for Google Classroom. Now then, so for tomorrow, let's finish this story off, and then Thursday at 2 o'clock, just like usual, is going to be our weekly Google meeting. So until then, I thank you all for coming over, and I will see you all next time.